Christmas night, 1943. The Arctic Ocean is alive with rage. Massive waves crash against steel. Freezing winds scream across the dark sea. Snow cuts through the night like knives. And somewhere inside this frozen hell, a monster is moving. Not just any ship. The pride of Nazi Germany, the terror of the seas, the mighty German battleship Scharnhorst, one of the fastest battleships ever built, carrying enormous guns powerful enough to destroy entire convoys within minutes. Tonight, its mission is simple: hunt down British merchant ships carrying vital supplies to the Soviet Union and send them to the bottom of the ocean. But what the Germans don't know is that this mission has already become a death trap. Because hidden inside the darkness of the Arctic, the British Royal Navy is waiting. And before this night ends, thousands of men will disappear beneath the freezing black water forever. This is the unbelievable true story of how the mighty Scharnhorst was hunted down and destroyed. And trust me, the ending is far more terrifying than anyone expected. So stay with me until the very end. Because this battle was not just about ships. It was about pride, strategy, technology, and the brutal reality of war itself. In late 1943, World War II had reached a turning point. Germany was losing ground across Europe. Hitler needed victories, big victories. And in the icy northern seas, German leaders believed one ship could still strike fear into the Allies: Scharnhorst. This gigantic battleship was fast, deadly, and heavily armored. For years, it had terrorized Allied shipping routes. British commanders respected it, sailors feared it, and Germany saw it as a symbol of power that still could not be broken. But by December 1943, the situation had changed. The British Navy had grown smarter, more patient, more deadly. They no longer wanted to merely chase German warships away. They wanted Scharnhorst destroyed forever. And so they prepared a carefully planned trap. Far to the north, Arctic convoys carrying fuel, weapons, food, and ammunition were moving toward the Soviet Union. If those supplies were destroyed, the Soviets would suffer terribly. Germany knew this, and they believed Scharnhorst could wipe out the convoy before the British could respond. So on Christmas Day, Scharnhorst left port under the command of Conter-Admiral Erich Bay, an experienced officer. Calm, determined, confident. But even he could not imagine what awaited him in the darkness ahead. The weather was horrific. Blizzards swallowed visibility. The sea tossed giant ships like toys. Snow and darkness covered everything. And yet Scharnhorst pushed forward at high speed through the Arctic waters. Inside the ship, German sailors prepared for battle. Massive shells were loaded into gigantic guns. Engine crews worked deep below deck, surrounded by unbearable heat and deafening noise. Radar operators searched the darkness for enemy movement. Everyone understood the mission: find the convoy, destroy it quickly, return home as heroes. Simple. At least that's what they thought. Hours passed. The Arctic night seemed endless. Then suddenly, something appeared on the radar. British ships. Not the convoy, warships. The hunters had arrived. Almost immediately, bright star shells exploded high above the ocean, turning the black sky white. For a few terrifying seconds, the darkness disappeared, and there it was. British cruisers closing in fast. Then came the flashes. British guns opened fire. Massive shells screamed across the freezing air toward Scharnhorst. The battle had begun. But Bay immediately realized something dangerous. These British ships were not fighting recklessly. They were shadowing him, tracking him, guiding him somewhere. Still, Scharnhorst was incredibly fast. Bay believed he could escape. He ordered the ship to turn hard away from the British attack while firing back with its rear guns. Gigantic explosions lit the stormy sea. The sound of naval artillery shook the entire ship. Every blast felt like the world itself was tearing apart. But then, disaster struck. A British shell smashed directly into Scharnhorst's radar system. Suddenly, the German ship lost its eyes in the darkness. Without radar, the crew could barely see through the storm. The Arctic night became a blind nightmare. and the British knew it. Now Scharnhorst was fighting blind while the enemy could still track every movement. Bay understood the danger immediately. Without radar, continuing the mission was madness. Reluctantly, he made a painful decision. Abort the attack, return to port, escape before things became worse. But what he did not know was that the real British force was still waiting ahead. Far to the south, hidden inside the darkness, sailed the most dangerous part of the trap, the British battleship HMS Duke of York, a giant warship armed with devastating 14-inch guns. And aboard that ship stood Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser himself, the commander of the British Home Fleet. He had not come merely to scare Scharnhorst away. He came to destroy it completely. When Fraser received reports that Scharnhorst was sailing directly toward his position, he knew the trap was working perfectly. The British warships moved carefully through the storm, silent, patient, deadly. Radar operators watched the enemy approach mile by mile. Closer, closer, closer. But aboard Scharnhorst, the Germans still had no idea. They believed they had escaped the cruisers. They thought the danger was behind them. In reality, the true nightmare waited ahead. Then, suddenly, another star shell exploded in the darkness directly in front of Scharnhorst. German sailors looked forward in shock, and out of the storm appeared the giant shadow of HMS Duke of York. Before anyone could react, boom. The British battleship unleashed a full broadside. The Arctic night exploded into fire. Massive shells tore through the sky toward Scharnhorst. One gigantic shell smashed directly into the forward turret. Men inside were killed instantly. Steel twisted. Fire erupted. The entire ship shook violently. More British shells crashed around them. Towering columns of water rose beside the ship like underwater explosions from hell itself. Scharnhorst fired back desperately. But the British had radar, precision, control. And slowly, the German ship began taking terrible damage. Still, the crew refused to surrender. Even surrounded by darkness, fire, smoke, and death, they kept fighting. Because they understood something horrifying. There was no easy escape anymore. If you are enjoying this story so far, comment below. History never sleeps. And if these incredible true stories fascinate you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this channel with others who love untold history. Your support truly helps this journey continue. And trust me, Part 2 becomes even more intense, because the real destruction of Scharnhorst has only just begun. The Arctic Ocean had become a battlefield of fire. Snowstorms raged across the freezing darkness. Explosions lit the sky. And deep within the chaos, the mighty German battleship Scharnhorst was fighting for survival. But now, the truth was impossible to ignore. The hunters had become executioners, and Scharnhorst was trapped. Inside the German battleship, alarms screamed endlessly. Smoke filled the corridors. Burning metal glowed red-hot. Men carried wounded sailors across slippery decks while giant guns continued firing into the storm. Every second felt like death was getting closer. Yet Admiral Erich Bay refused to surrender. He knew the pride of Germany was aboard this ship. He knew retreat alone was no longer enough. Now, only one thing mattered: escape. At maximum speed, Scharnhorst turned eastward, trying desperately to outrun the British fleet. Its engines roared with enormous power. Steel trembled across the ship as the massive battleship cut through towering Arctic waves. And slowly, it began pulling away. A feeling of hope spread among the German crew. Maybe they could survive. Maybe speed would save them. Even the British aboard HMS Duke of York grew nervous. Scharnhorst was one of the fastest warships ever built. If it escaped into the storm, the entire trap could fail. The British continued firing through darkness and snow, but hitting a fast-moving target at long range in Arctic conditions was extremely difficult. Then suddenly, another disaster struck the British. A German shell hit Duke of York and damaged its radar system. The effect was catastrophic. Steam systems failed, power dropped, speed collapsed. The mighty battleship that once outran entire fleets suddenly slowed dramatically. And at that exact moment, Admiral Bay understood the terrible truth. The battle was lost. Still, even facing certain death, he did not surrender. Instead, he sent one final message. "We will fight to the last shell." Those words were not just military orders. They revealed the brutal reality of war. Pride, duty, fear, loyalty, all trapped together inside a burning ship surrounded by enemies. Engine crews worked desperately below deck to restore power. Miraculously, they managed to increase speed again. But not enough. Not nearly enough. Because now the British destroyers were closing in, fast, deadly, and carrying torpedoes, the most terrifying weapon against a crippled battleship. In the freezing darkness, British destroyers rushed toward Scharnhorst from multiple directions like wolves surrounding a wounded animal. German secondary guns opened fire furiously. Explosions erupted across the ocean. Tracer rounds streaked through the storm. The sea itself seemed to explode around them, but there were too many attackers. One British destroyer launched torpedoes, then another. Deadly metal weapons raced silently beneath the freezing water toward Scharnhorst. Then, impact. The first torpedo slammed into the ship with devastating force. The entire battleship shook violently. Men were thrown across compartments. Steel walls cracked. Water flooded inside. But the attack did not stop. More destroyers attacked from different sides. Another torpedo struck, then another, then another. Massive explosions ripped through Scharnhorst's hull. The mighty warship began slowing further. Water poured into the ship faster than crews could control it. Still, the Germans fought back. Even while burning, even while sinking, even while surrounded. The rear turret. Caesar continued firing at the British fleet. One final act of resistance from a dying giant. And incredibly, one shell even managed to hit a British destroyer. But courage alone could no longer save the ship. The British closed in for the final attack. Destroyers launched another wave of torpedoes at point-blank range. This time, the impacts were devastating. Huge explosions tore open the hull. The last operational turret finally fell silent. The giant ship began leaning heavily to one side. Inside, darkness spread through flooding compartments. Power systems failed. Fires raged uncontrollably. Screams echoed through smoke-filled passageways. And slowly, the realization spread among the crew. This was the end. Admiral Bay remained on the bridge as the ship tilted beneath him. All around him, the pride of the German Navy was dying. Finally, he gave the order no commander ever wishes to speak. Abandon ship. Imagine that moment. Freezing Arctic water below, darkness everywhere, the ship that had once terrified entire oceans, now collapsing beneath your feet. Many sailors jumped into the icy sea knowing survival was almost impossible. And then, the mighty Scharnhorst began its final descent. The bow disappeared first. The stern slowly lifted into the air. Its giant propellers still turned weakly above the freezing water. Then the entire battleship slipped beneath the Arctic Ocean forever. Gone. Almost 2,000 men had sailed aboard Scharnhorst. Only 36 survived. The freezing water killed most within minutes. Conter-Admiral Eric Bay did not survive. Even the British felt the weight of what they had witnessed. After the battle, Admiral Bruce Fraser spoke words that shocked many of his own men. He praised the courage of the enemy crew. Because true warriors understand something important. Real courage exists on all sides of war, and sometimes even enemies earn respect through their final stand. The sinking of Scharnhorst became one of the most dramatic naval battles of World War II, but it also revealed something deeper. No machine is invincible. No empire lasts forever. And sometimes the difference between victory and destruction comes down to leadership, determination, and ordinary people refusing to give up. If this story moved you, comment below. Legends never surrender. And if you believe history teaches lessons that the modern world must never forget, support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with others. Because here, history is not just told, it is uncovered.